Welcome, everybody, to a special presentation for our System Admin Insights community. My name is Alex Marcus, and I'd like to kick things off with some gratitude before we dive in. What are you grateful for today? Go ahead and share one thing that you're grateful for. You can even throw a picture in there if you'd like. I personally am incredibly grateful for Colin Day for joining us today. I have thought about iCIMS pretty much every day for the past 7 years of my life. Since my first iCIMS implementation at Good Shepherd Services in New York City. So to get to hang out with the founder of iCIMS, to be able to introduce you to our community today is just such a pleasure and an honor. And I thank you so much for joining us, Colin. So welcome.
It's a pleasure.
This is awesome.
And Paul and Natalie, if you can help to mute anybody who falls off of mute. Appreciate it. Thank you. Natalie shared that she's grateful for her network, her friends, her family, and for her health. And it looks like I needed to actually turn that button on. There we go. So I see some gratitude flowing in. Cooler weather in Georgia, starting to feel like fall in November. To Colin and Alex, both have been our biggest supporters since day one at Echo. Thank you. Absolutely, Tofik. Grateful for people who make me laugh and lift folks up. I love that. For Rain, awesome. Yeah, indeed. For that dog, very nice. Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions for Colin today, but let's take a moment to find out who's in the room with us. So we'll start off with, what iCIMS hats have you worn in your career? I'll give you 30 seconds. Have you been an iCIMS end user, like a recruiter or a TA coordinator, manager, iCIMS system administrator, current iCIMS staff member, former iCIMS staff member? You can make more than one selection, none of the above. Okay, a lot of iCIMS system administrators in the room. All right, great. Our next question is, what industry do you currently work in? Great, always get a lot of healthcare. 10 seconds remaining. All right. And the third question is, how about company size? How many employees does your company currently have? All right, about 50% of folks in the room are the company's over 10,000 employees. That's great. All right, thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started with our questions. So, Colin, our first question was submitted by Alina Syed. And she asked, she's with Post Holdings, and she asked, what were some of the challenges that you faced in developing iCIMS? And how did your original vision for iCIMS differ from the platform that we know and leverage today?
Yeah, thanks, Alina. Gosh, some of these questions probably could be books, so I got to be careful about keep it very high level. But maybe I'll just talk about the various iterations, because the company changed pretty dramatically over the course of the 20 years that I ran it. A few things stayed pretty consistent. Our mission, our vision stayed rock solid and consistent all the way through, but we did find that pivoting was a huge part of our success. So if you don't know the background, I actually started at a tech staffing firm. I was a recruiter. I graduated with a psychology degree. There were two things I didn't know in life. I didn't know tech, and I didn't know recruiting. And so, what a perfect start to found a tech recruiting company. But I cut my chops on recruiting. And we were using an internally built system. The company was called Comrise. The system was called Comrise's Information Management System, SIMS. Just had one of those moments where you're like, all right, we might be at the perfect place at the perfect time, which is the world's moving to internet-based software. We've got the beginnings of this software, which we can architect for it. It wasn't even called SaaS back then. It was called ASP software. This was back when Benioff was starting Salesforce as well. So kind of we were all getting off the ground and doing horrible things that like Tofik you would not do, like build data centers and all sorts of other god awful things that you don't have to do today. But we spun out. It was an all organic story. So we didn't do angels, we didn't do venture capital. We took a loan from the staffing firm that we spun out of, and they kind of funded us for the first couple of years until we got to profitability. So I guess to go to your question, just to show you like how many pivots we did make. First of all, I was super happy that we came out of a staffing firm because I was convinced that recruiting was more of a CRM motion than it was an HR finance motion. And I always felt like recruiting's, it's getting a bad rap for being put over in HR and finance because it is much more like marketing, like selling, like servicing. And I think that gave us a distinct advantage of kind of coming out from a staffing firm thinking that way. We originally did decide that let's just sell to staffing firms. We knew it worked for ours, so we kind of figured it would probably work for other staffing firms. Did quite well, sold to them, and learned a lot, but ultimately just learned it's a very difficult market to play in. It's great when it's great. It goes super volatile when the market goes volatile. And their demands are pretty big because for them, this is not just a recruiting system. It's more like an ERP. Like, how do I build clients? How do I? And so we made a pretty quick pivot to say, hey, I don't think staffing's the right side for us. We did have staffing customers straight the way through, but we said, I think our focus should be the corporate market. And when we looked at the corporate market, we were somewhat stunned, first of all, how many players there were out there. There were probably like 50 ATSs. And what we found was like no one knew each from the other. Like what's a Verve, what's an iCIMS, what's an iCIMS, these are some of the originals. We did see that the high end of the market was very crowded. So there were companies, they weren't even called Taleo, but the Taleo, the Verbs, et cetera, that were going after the high end. And we saw that there was a pretty wide open void in what we called SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses. And I think I just read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which is like, don't go swim where the sharks are, go find like your own blue ocean and win that thing. And so we said, all right, let's go after SMB. And we put it all over the website. We are the ATS for kind of small, medium-sized businesses. And I think it just spoke to the market. The market wanted to hear, like, I can't afford a Taleo. I can't afford. So what is built for me? And we rode that really successfully to, 25, probably 30, 40 million. And then there was a moment, I'm not sure if anyone remembers this in the industry, but all of the players started crossing over into each other's territories. So, Success Factors announced, hey, we're not just going to do performance, we're going to do recruiting. Taleo said, fine, well, then we won't do recruiting, we'll also do performance. Cornerstone was like, all right, we'll get into recruiting as well. And so we took a look and we said, we think this is the way the industry is going. We think it's probably how we have to go, is this kind of full-blown end-to-end talent management. We actually were doing this right when we got our first public investor, this company called Susquehanna Growth Equity. And we gave them this huge plan of, hey, I'm going to get from 25 to $100 million by broadening out to employee management, performance management, learning, succession. Very, very thankfully, while we were building this stuff and announcing it, a number of our customers called me and said, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is not what we want. We did not buy you for this stuff. We are not interested in this stuff. We bought you to be good at recruiting. Don't be like everyone else. Please just stay focused. And so I am very thankful that we did what our customers told us to do. And I had it was my first board meeting with an outside investor. And I said, hey, remember how I told you we'd get to 100 million on post-hire? I was like, we need you to tear that up. We're going to stay focused on TA and we're just going to go after recruiting. And I'll show you another path of how we might be able to get to 100 million or beyond. So that was a huge pivot for us. And then the final one, which probably most of you know us now as today, but was that right around the time this was happening, Oracle, IBM, and SAP swooped into our industry and bought the three largest enterprise vendors in Taleo, SuccessFactors, and Connexa. And so first reaction was, ooh, we should probably stay away from that. Those are really big companies. And then the second reaction after we thought about it is they're going to screw it up. These are companies that have histories of screwing these things up. So this might be the moment to say, right, we're going to stay in talent acquisition, but I don't think we'll get to 100 million or 200 million on a small, medium-sized customer base. And I think we're going to need to go enterprise and really go after the largest companies out there. So that was really probably the final big pivot that we made. And obviously that's very much what we're known for today. So it's a long-winded way of telling you it was a very circuitous route to kind of the company that I think everyone knows today.
And so one thing that's really key there is I heard you say that you went to the customers and talked to the customers and listened to what they were saying, and they were giving you feedback that like, look, let's not turn this into a post-hire giant one-stop shop for everything. Let's stay focused on the core functionality and listening to those customers help guide your decision toward where you took the company.
Customer feedback was critical, mainly because I will readily admit it. I was a mid 20-year-old learning on the job of what is SaaS and what is recruiting and how does this all work. And so the only thing we knew was go listen to the customers. Yeah. They'll tell us what is needed and what we're going to have to build. I will say, Alex, we knew one thing, which was growing up in the small, medium-sized business market, we knew we had to be what we called pure SaaS. So in the early days of SaaS, a lot of people just went to the internet, but then they did all sorts of like no-nos, like I'm going to customize the code for this customer, I'm going to customize the code for that customer. Yeah. Taleo did that. I mean, they were all doing it. And we coming out of SMB, when we said we're going to go after enterprise, we said, here's the one caveat. We're not going to get off of pure SaaS. So we're not going to build custom features. We're not going to build custom systems. It's still going to be one platform, one. So we painted on the walls, build for the good of the platform. So it was even though we're going to listen to the customers of what they want, we have to translate to what's good for the platform. So if someone wants a feature, we would go back and ask ourselves, does this work for everyone? Or could we build it in a way that it works for everyone? Or at least build it in a way that it's in the administrator interface where we can toggle it on and off, depending on whether they want to use it. So, we were pretty doggedly determined that we're not going to veer from pure SaaS. And I think that benefited us for scale. But, particularly as we were going up market, we had to learn everything about how does an enterprise company operate. Yeah. We knew SMB relatively well, but and that was just, hard lessons of, I remember signing Continental Airlines as one of the first challenges of, hey, you clearly don't understand how a bigger company works. I think Enterprise Rent-A-Car pushed us a little bit in that direction. FedEx pushed us, Amazon pushed us, Microsoft pushed us. So, while we generally knew what was good for the platform, there was a huge amount of learning about how does this platform get extended, both sort of for features and services for the enterprise clientele. Got it. But yeah, I mean, I can honestly say that feedback from the customers about staying focused on TA, that was, you wouldn't know iCIMS today if we hadn't heard that from them. And I'm just so thankful for them for telling us to do that. And I'm also thankful for the investors for saying, all right, let's do a hard pivot. Let's go in a totally different direction than we thought.
Wow. Cool. All right, let's go on to our second question here. The second question is about client feedback and product evolution. So how did feedback from early clients, actually, we kind of talked about this. So how did feedback from early clients shape the development of iCIMS? So aside from what you already shared, were there any other unexpected insights that led to major product changes?
I think besides what I shared, one of the things we learned pretty early on, particularly as we were going into enterprise, is that, there's a high capacity to turn what may have started as a relatively straightforward, simple system into like a Frankenstein system.
Mm.
Like, hey, I needed to have 17 custom tabs and all these fields and this and that or whatever. And so I think we learned from the customer, number one, get better about hiding things that they're not going to use. Just try to remove a bit of confusion from them. And number two, honestly, was push back when we thought that they were introducing complexity. Like, oh, do you really need 10 extra tabs in your system? Like, couldn't we organize it another way? So I think trying to deal with complexity in a somewhat elegant manner, it's almost impossible to do it perfectly, but if you can say we did it in somewhat of an elegant manner, I think you're kind of ahead of the game.
Yeah. And this audience is really at that point where they are the ones who are in the front line managing that complexity internally, right?
Yeah.
And so what was your perspective on that role, that unique role inside your client base of that person whose job it was to be the system administrator for iCIMS?
I mean, first of all, we knew they were critical. We in an SMB world, they didn't even exist.
Yeah.
We would hand over the software and just basically be like, go, like we'll configure it a little bit for you behind the scenes. But
Yeah.
it was wonderful to finally have like an implementation compatriot like on the client side.
Yeah.
And to be able to sort of say go back and forth and hey, is this the right call? Is it servicing your need or is it introducing too much complexity, etc.? So I think it was working with admins that kind of taught us how to do it. So
Yeah.
huge part of the role.
Yeah. Great. All right. Our next question. Looking back, what were the most critical leadership decisions you made during iCIMS' early years, and how do those decisions shape the company?
Oh, lots of decisions. Many of them not great, by the way. The one I always talk about, and but just because it was so counterintuitive to me, but it also worked, was it was quite early on in our history, and we were selling again in this very competitive, non-differentiated market. I always tell a joke, we used to get sent spreadsheets. I'm sending this to every vendor. Here's a spreadsheet of like 1,000 features we need in an ATS. Check off what you have, and we'll basically go with the one with the most checks. And we even had customers who would sign up with us and then be like, we're so excited to implement Verve. And I'm like, we're iCIMS, right? We're not Verve. So there was just so much confusion in the early days. But because of that, like high state of competition, SaaS is tough. You sync all your costs, right? Like, so we bought the software and the data center, et cetera. And then you really just go after like incremental recurring revenue. And you hope that at some point your recurring revenue exceeds your recurring expenses and you're off to the races as a profitable company. The problem was in the early days of SaaS, no one really gave a damn about profitability. It was just about revenue. Like, as long as you're growing, you're the most exciting company. And so competitors were just fighting on price because all you needed to show that you were growing. And so, I'm not even going to, to give you an example, seats might have been like 100 a month. And then someone said 90, someone said 80, someone said 70, we start selling at 50. And I went to the board. I said, this is just horrendous. Like, this is horrific, the state of competition and the price wars that we're getting into. And I just need to warn you that, we're having to sign these deals at incredibly low prices. And the board said, here's what we want you to do. We want you to quadruple your price. And I like my jaw dropped. I said, didn't you just hear everything I said? It's massively competitive. And they said, quadruple your price.
Wow.
You need to stand out. I want people to be somewhat stunned when they see your price and they say, like, we love you. We think you're one of the best software out there. Why are you 4 times more expensive than some of the other things out there? And that's when we said, now we can sell. Not about features, but about awesome. Let me tell you what, we're the only vendor that's profitable out there. And so if you're going to go with anyone, number one thing you should be looking at rather than 1,000 features is this company going to stay in business?
Yeah.
You know, number two, because we're profitable, we invested back in, we got great customer service to back up the great software. So, Alex, it was this, you know, kind of crazy, you know, counterintuitive, but really saved us from, and it allowed us to sell on a different level, not really against our competitors, but against our own brand and our own value. And so that was enormous. And I probably
that must have been scary too. I mean,
incredibly scary. Incredible. I think we all thought, you know, there were many decisions that we thought this is going to either like go well or, you know, take us down. But it was amazing that you watched it. And then you watch the pride in your own sales force. To be like, you don't understand. I won this deal at 4 times the price of the closest competitor.
Right.
And that pride comes through. And I think the customer begins to see that pride. I believe that's, you know, they are the best based on that pricing and what they're talking about. And then we paired that with be profitable. Again, as a young 20-year-old, I kept getting told over and over and over by venture capitalists who are like, seems like you're running a great company, but you don't understand what software as a service is. You don't run profitably. You know, it just means you don't believe in your company. It just means you're not going after growth. Like, and I said, I just fundamentally kind of don't agree with that. We've had some near-death experiences. Being profitable is absolutely enormous to that. So. Yeah, I think a lot of these decisions around raising prices so you can be profitable, maintaining profitability in an industry that didn't really reward it, to be honest, were probably some of the biggest things we did.
So if you're not profitable, can you help the audience understand how do you run a business? How are businesses run that are not profitable? Are they just burning through venture capital, or what does that actually mean?
I often say with difficulty. You raise money, and you have a burn rate. So basically, your recurring costs are higher than your recurring revenue. And so you have a burn rate, which gives you a run rate. You can sort of know, I know my burn, I know how much cash we have, and I know the run rate.
Yeah.
And often, you know, it's such a large burn rate that you're already thinking about your next raise. Before you're even kind of getting out and doing. We just thought that if we were profitable and did it all ourselves and we never really had to worry about raising money, it would take an enormous amount of pressure off of us in terms of how fast we needed to grow, in terms of, you know, how much attention would need to not go into the product and the customers, but actually go out to raising and investing.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled we made that decision. It was not in vogue, as I mentioned, but I think later when a number of highly financed companies went out of business, investors started to see the value of profitability.
Got it. Okay, let's go to our next question. What did the process of scaling iCIMS look like from your perspective, and what do you learn? What was challenging about the process of scaling?
I honestly, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You're right in it, but it was just resources at some point. You know, I think in the early days, it's a go-to-market challenge, and you're just like, hey, how do we get in front of customers? How do we price it right? How do we service them? And then when you've cracked that nut, and it all starts like a flywheel to just go at high volume, you suddenly pivot into, we were getting into we doubled every 3 years. So from 10 to 20, from 20 to 50, from 50 to 100, to 100 to 200, every 3 years we were doubling. And I think the scariest thing when we looked at these plans was not how many customers do we need to sign and what are the retention rates and how much upsell and cross-sell. It was, oh my God, we're running out of office space again, and I have no idea how we're going to hire all these people. Like, it took us 12 years to get 250 people, and we need to get 200 people next year alone. And so thank God I had some awesome operators who kept pointing this out in budgeting cycles. Like, Colin, do you see how many new implementation managers we're going to need to hire? How many subject matter experts we're going to need to hire? And I think we said, well, guys, we're in talent acquisition, so we should probably over invest in that and believe in it. So we made a pretty enormous G&A budget increment early on and said, for a lot of investors who like to see G&A stay relatively thin, we went the opposite direction and said, guys, I don't think we're going to be able to do any of this if we don't have, talent sourcers, talent acquisition specialists, talent onboarders, talent development specialists, career planners. So I think we tried to punch above our weight class in the size of the organization that we built around talent, kind of recognizing that I'm not saying signing customers ever got easy, but hiring people became a harder challenge than signing customers. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, offices. I was shocked at how many times I would sign a lease for what I thought was the craziest, most wonderful, biggest office I've ever seen in my life. And then 2 years later get told we don't have any more space. And we've got to move to a new office. So yeah, human resources and office space was kind of what it all became about in the latter years.
Got it. All right, our next question. Can you share a moment when iCIMS faced a significant setback? How did that experience contribute to your approach to business resilience?
Yeah. So one of the fun things I've gotten to connect post iCIMS with so many SaaS founders, and I think everyone has a near-death story. You just kind of have to coax it out of them. It's like, hey, when did you nearly die? Because I know it happened, and we had a near-death story relatively early on. And this was when we were kind of still a lot of staffing, still a lot of SMB, and we were operating off of loans coming from the parent company. And the market, the .com, and clearly went to the .bomb. Everything went sideways. The parent company, the staffing firm, gave us a call and said, this market is completely dried up. And so we're going to incubate, and we're going to shut down your funding. And I said, well, okay, but we're nowhere near profitability. And they said, yeah, you do what you need to do. My recommendation, maybe shut the business down, come back to the staffing firm and work as a recruiter.
Wow.
Wow. So I had a pretty rough few days kind of thinking this one through. It's like, we have assets, we have customers, we have revenue. I don't even know how to shut a company down. Like, what do you do? Sell those or...
You just don't show up the next day.
No. Yeah. So we did a really hard thing, probably the hardest thing we did over my 20 years, which was that we were about 30 people, and I just went in, we sat down with the accountant. I'm like, you've got to do back in the envelope calculation for me. Like, how many customers do we have? How much revenue do we have? What's our run rate? And how many employees could we keep if we were going to try to stay in business and just kind of do this all by ourselves? And the answer was 8. Wow. And so, hardest day, we just had to line up 22 out of 30 people and say, this has nothing to do with you. The market's gone, our funding's gone, the loan is gone. We are going to keep 8 people, and there's a very high chance we don't make it, but we're going to give it a go. And that day we turned profitable by necessity.
Wow.
And I'm really thankful for it, because I don't think if I'd had that lesson, I wouldn't have had that long-standing respect for profitability. And I probably would have been coaxed into, burning and raising and spending. and then gotten burned in 2008,
Mm,
or 2009. So as hard as that lesson was, it forced us to profitability. We kind of never looked back, and then it allowed us to withstand some other pretty nasty recessions like the Great Recession. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people knew that, or you never want to talk about the company had a near-death experience, but they're very
yeah.
thankfully it was a long time ago, and yeah, we managed
Wow.
through it.
Going a little off script, Molly Donovan has a student who is working on a startup idea. If you had one piece of advice for, let's say, somebody who's in their early 20s who is thinking of doing a startup, considering the arc of your experience, what one piece of advice would you give that student?
It's tough to give advice because people can come at this from so many different angles. But for me, I always say, luck and timing played an enormous, enormous role in our story.
Yeah.
And so when you say, well, explain that to me, and it's be like, okay, well, let me explain it to you. I was with a company that already had a software platform built, that was willing to spin it out, that was willing to fund us through loans rather than VC or angel, where we probably would have died had we gone that route. We also happened to be starting when this thing called the internet was becoming popular and software was converting from client server over to, so I think, look for those pivotal moments where you also feel beyond a good idea, luck and timing is on your side. Funding is everything. Every discussion I have with every founder, every company is usually a funding discussion.
Mm.
Do we need friends and family? Do we need angel? Do we need venture capital? Do we try to bootstrap it? Can we get to profitability by ourselves? So
Yeah.
I think, it's got to be so many things. A good idea married to like really hard work, married to good timing, married to funding sources. And I think it's when they all kind of come together that you get that special opportunity to grow something.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. All right. Our next question before we go to our break is balancing innovation and stability. How did you balance the pressure to innovate quickly with the need to maintain a stable, reliable platform for your clients?
That's an awesome question. It changed a little over time. So in the early days, we were just an ATS, and innovation was really everything. The funny thing is we started when the internet was relatively unstable. We used to go on demos and, we would never, things would go down in the middle of it. And it would be like the client arguing whether their network went down or maybe our software went down. No one knew. It was, just the world was so unstable when we were first getting going. Innovation was everything. Like I mentioned, it was hyper competitive. People were fighting on features. And so you had to innovate. You had to have more features. You had to, and then I think it pivoted greatly when we started to go up market, when we decided, we're going to stay in the TA category, but we think that rather than just an ATS, like TA needs its own platform. Like it needs a CRM, it needs an ATS, it needs onboarding, it needs marketing automation, it needs, and so we saw our mandate as being much more of a stable, reliable core platform. And that the innovation was probably going to happen on the fringe, with this massive, massive ecosystem of TA tech startups that were out there. And so we kind of made a double bet, which is we're going to focus on platform stability and reliability because I can tell you pretty clearly there's an enterprise customer doesn't give a damn how many features you have if it goes down. like it doesn't matter. So I think that was our bet. And then we said, let's build what at the time we called Unify, which was our partner network. And to basically say that I want to build a partner team. I want to integrate with anything that's out there. that's doing something cool in TA so that they can work off of our platform, off of our APIs, and basically become our innovation layer, which not only served two purposes, which is number one, it allowed us to work with all these great companies, but it also allowed us to study the trends of like where was the innovation happening and what were our customers buying. And as we began to get more cash and resources, it was a very nice funnel for M&A. So some of the early acquisitions, companies like TextRecruit, et cetera, were based off of seeing these massively innovative partners in our network just kind of killing it, and saying, that seems core. That seems like something that we should probably own rather than partner with. So yeah.
Great. All right, it's time for our mid-meeting break. If you haven't joined us on the presentation yet, you can go to ahaslides.com/SAI1. And it's time to test your iCIMS knowledge. Our first question is match the acquisition with what it's now called in iCIMS. You've got 30 seconds to match the acquisition. Tawfiq may have an advantage here. Ten seconds remaining. All right, Tiffany in the lead, followed by Cheryl and Ariel. Great. Next question. Some more acquisition matching. By the way, Andrea Wade, the founder of opening.io, will be joining us in December. I'll share more information about that in a moment, at the end of the call. Ten seconds. Tiffany and Cheryl neck and neck. Natalie catching up. Next question. Put the iCIMS investors in the correct chronological order. There was a hint in Colin's answer earlier. TA Associates, Susquehanna Growth Equity, Vista Equity Partners. Susquehanna, followed by Vista, followed by TA Associates. Natalie pulling into second place, followed by John Barth. Got two more questions. Which features are part of the iCIMS Fall 2024 release? Copilot email writing assistant for CXM and CRM, document expiration alerts for onboarding compliance, at mentioning and notifications in the ATS, drag and drop report builder. Which of those features are actually part of the iCIMS Fall 2024 release? Oh, we're very, very excited about the app mentioning in the platform and that Copilot email writing assistant. Our final question. We've got Natalie pulling into lead, followed by Tiffany, and then John Barth. Last question. You get points, by the way, for the speed with which you answer the questions. I should have mentioned that earlier. What does iCIMS stand for? The perennial question. I asked AI for some plausible options here. I think they did a pretty good job.
You don't want to know how many times I got asked over 20 years to change the name of the company.
Is my company called IRD, Integral Recruiting, Integral Recruiting? Yeah. Correct answer was Internet Collaborative Information Management System. Let's see who our winner is here.
It rolls off the tongue.
It sure does. Cheryl pulled in at the very last moment into first place. Congratulations, Cheryl. I will get you a Logitech MX Master Performance mouse. Just send me your mailing address and I'll get that to you. All right. So before we get back to our questions, we also have a special offer today. For those of you in the room who aren't yet official members of our SAI community, if you use the code COLINDAY at checkout, you can get 35% off of an annual membership. We have an all-purpose community for HR system administrators and an iCIMS specific community that you can join. The code is active for the next 2 weeks. You can learn more at the link that I've just put in chat. And now we'll get back to our questions. Thanks, everybody. All right, Colin. So the next question, we're going to actually, this is a poll as well. So which strategy is most effective for maintaining a strong company culture during rapid expansion? I wanted to poll the audience first and see what they thought. We've got 15 seconds. Which strategy is most effective for maintaining a strong company culture during rapid expansion? So we got some more, most votes for consistent messaging from leadership. Cool. So Colin, that was Cherie. That was Cherie's question. What's your perspective on that?
Hey, Cherie. It's great to hear from you. My gosh, culture is one of those that like I don't know. I don't think you can write down exactly what it was. For me, I thought what was super important about our company was that we had some North Stars. I'd call them almost like guardrails for the company. Some people call them non-negotiables, which is, I think one I already talked about. We're not going to write code for individual customers. So that's going to be something very hard that we're all going to have to sit down with customers and explain. I mean, I don't understand why you can't do that. Can you just do it? Well, if we do it for 5,000 customers, so that was a big one. We told everyone we're going to focus on talent acquisition and that's it. So let's not waste any time talking about other stuff. And that we're going to operate profitably and let's not think otherwise. So I think we set North Stars for the company of this is kind of who we are at the core. Mm-hmm. And then we hired amazing people, which obviously everyone knows is a big part of the equation, that we're ambassadors for the company. We wanted to be a customer-first company. We wanted to be known for customer service. And so we basically said, listen, 3 or 4 simple parameters. We don't custom code. We're going to be staying in TA and we're going to run profitably. And other than that, get out there and do what you think is right for the customer. And we try to give people as much leeway as possible to make decisions and empower them on that. So it probably hits a few of those columns. So I can't say there's any one, silver bullet to culture, but I think the North Star followed by great people, followed by empowering them and letting them do their damn jobs is kind of what it was all about.
Did you ever wrestle with letting go?
With me personally letting go?
Yeah.
No, I was thrilled to let go. That's the way I kind of saw it. As I said, listen, if I'm busy, something's wrong. And then I would try to look at my C's and sort of say the same thing. If they're running around like the house is on fire, something's wrong. And so, it was tough, but I said, I have basically, hired myself out of my day job. So that I can honestly just walk around, be an ambassador, talk to new hires, get them excited about the vision, talk to customers. But I wanted each of my C's to do the same thing, which is be like, I want you to go hire people that are better than you, under you, and put you out of your day job.
Yeah.
And we'll all do well if we end up doing that. So yeah. Yeah. I think that was key.
Got it. How did your personal definition of success evolve over the years as iCIMS grew from a startup to an industry leader?
It's probably honestly exactly what I mentioned, which was in the early days, it was about having a better product and selling customers and gaining market share and increasing revenue and profitability. And that's how I define success is, we're this revenue, we're this profitability, we're growing faster than the market, we're taking market share. We're now we used to have it on people knew like we're the sixth largest. Now we're the fifth largest. Now we're the fourth largest. Now we're the third largest. So I think there was a lot of inspiration around that of like, wow, look, we're moving up the leaderboard. Like, could we ever get to the largest? So I think it took me a while to sort of realize that, as I mentioned before, once the go-to-market muscle is there and you've got it and it's sort of sustainable, then it really just all comes about the strength of the people in the company. And I think there are a couple of ex-iCIMS employees on this. You'll probably know this about me, but I used to print an org chart out every single day. Which is, I thought I was environmentally friendly, but I probably killed a few trees each day, particularly as the company became large, like 1,000 employees.
Yeah.
I became fascinated by the organization, like less so the product, the revenue, and the profitability, but much more like, are we set up right? Do we have the right lines of responsibility? Do we have the right spans of control? Are there people that have why would a manager report to a VP, not a director? Why would, I became really, really obsessed with that. And so it was for me, it was a really, and maybe it tied into the organizational psychology degree that I had and, trying to learn about that. But scalability, reporting structures, career plannings, like those became much more fundamental to kind of how I needed to think about our success.
Brendan Spiegel's in the room. He said Colin always had the org chart in hand.
Yeah. Hey, Brendan. I'll never remember we had a Halloween costume and someone put a blazer on and printed an org chart out and they were me. Which I'll never forget that day.
Oh, that's great. All right. Our next question from Alina once again. How has a transition from founder and CEO to founder and advisor been?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a very honest answer here. I planned for a very kind of smooth, stepwise transition, and it ended up being insanely abrupt. And I'll sort of explain that, which was that I knew as I was coming up to 20 years that I had put my all into it, and I think I was burning out, and that it was probably time for someone to come figure out how to take it from 250 million to 500 million. I couldn't see how I was going to do that, and while enjoying it and giving my all. So, we did the deal with Vista Equity. I told them I would be stepping down and that I wanted a very smooth transition. And we had a board member, Steve Lucas, who I thought was terrific. And we asked him to come in and take over. And I was going to come in 3 days a week. I was going to advise with him. I was going to be a bit of a cultural ambassador. And I stepped down March 1st, 2020. And if you happen to know what happened then, 2 weeks later, the entire world shut down.
Wow.
And number one, two things became abundantly clear. Like one, I'm not going into the office. and two, Steve is in crisis management mode and he knows what he's doing. And he probably doesn't need the founder of a company hovering around. And so I think I had to just look in the mirror and be like, maybe this is divine intervention here, that you weren't supposed to do a soft transition. Like maybe you were just supposed to walk away and let others take over. So COVID kind of forced my hand. I stayed on the board, and they did at one point decide that they wanted to look at the option of going public. I said being on a public board sounds like my idea of a nightmare. So I dropped off of the board and said best of luck. They ultimately did not go public. But I'd moved on, and so I still technically am an advisor, but I guess, Alina, I would describe myself as I think it's going well if I'm available but not needed. And I am incredibly hands off, and it has allowed me to kind of do a lot of other things in life right now, which are really, really fun. And so, yeah, very different than I thought it was going to happen. But when I look back at it, I almost think like, gosh, it couldn't have happened any other way. It needed to be like that, to be a hard cut, and a slightly lonely walk. But if you could imagine, what's worse than COVID? It's like you quit your job with only like I was going to travel the world and see my friends after 20 years of planning it out, and like that was off the table.
Yeah.
So, it was an interesting year for me. Yeah.
So what are some of those other things that you're doing now that you're enjoying?
It's been all over. The first thing I honestly wanted to do was just say like I need to focus on myself, my health. So I sat down. I always ran off of a calendar. I would just come in and people would say like, here's 8:30 to like 6 p.m. in like half-hour increments, go. And then suddenly I stared at a calendar that was completely wide open, and I think freaked out like, oh my, this is not good. So I tried to figure out all the things that I put on the back burner from a health perspective. Like I want to play tennis 3 days a week. I want to, do Pilates. I want to, walk the dog every day. All the things that I thought were good for me and my soul. To be around my family, to have breakfast with them, drive kids to school, do lunch with my wife and friends, and I think once I got those two things settled, then it started to be like I think I just want to give back. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I don't think I could have done iCIMS any other way. Like raise money, grow fast, sell it fast, do it again and again and again. Mine was a very slow, methodical journey that kind of took a lot out. So the giving back has been partially like philanthropic in the community. But the big one for me was I want to just give back to the software world, the world that gave so much to me. So my first call was to Susquehanna Growth Equity, the private equity firm. They said, come be a partner, come be an advisor here. We think you should be sitting on boards, which I've been lucky enough to sit on 6 SaaS boards. And more recently, I think even more fun than boards is I had to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that I don't think the private equity investors wanted me to get back into HR tech. I had a lockup, and but once that was over, I did get to start connecting. Tofik is on the phone and knows, but with a whole bunch of just really awesome next generation HR tech SaaS companies, and I have loved working with them and advising them. I think I live vicariously kind of through them. So I equate it to like being a grandparent. It's like playing with a kid, but then going home.
Very nice.
But yeah, having a lot of fun.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. Any advice for entrepreneurs? What advice would you give to entrepreneurs looking to enter the HR tech space today? So HR tech space specifically.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the 6 SaaS boards that I've sat on, there's 3 are current, 3 actually exited. None of them were in HR tech. So all of my expertise was around kind of just helping SaaS companies scale and grow. But I advise I call it about 10, maybe 12, like a dozen HR tech CEOs now, that are in some form of either startup or, round A, round B. And to me, the biggest things for anyone kind of entering the space is, do you understand the customer's tech ecosystem and where you fit in? This is super, super complicated. And like, so you're going to describe what you are, and you're going to have this glazed over look from the customer being like, I don't get it. Are you an HRIS? Are you an ATS? Are you a job board, a sourcing tool? Are you a... So I think you need to really hone in on, I know your ecosystem. I know the systems you have. This is what we are. And we're, maybe part of your ATS, or we're a bridge between the ATS and the HRIS, or, but I think the ones that I see entering and struggling are the ones that kind of just describe this is what we do, but can't say immediately, here's how I snap into your tech ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first thing I try to do with work with them is, even just for myself, like, I need to understand, like, where would you fit in to that? And then based on that, do you actually know who your buyer is? It's very difficult to figure out who buyers are sometimes. Like, in the early days, they were like TA leaders, and then in the enterprise, it became like CHROs, but then CHROs got pushed aside by CFOs and COOs, and, Workday came in, and, those were often, TA was sometimes rarely even brought to the table for that discussion, which was such a shame.
Yeah.
So I think, number one, know where you fit in the ecosystem. Number two, based on where you fit in the ecosystem, who is the buyer? And number three, are you priced in a way that that buyer would recognize? So if this is someone that says like, oh, I buy things typically on a per user basis or on a per employee basis, are you aligned to how they've bought other things? So that you don't have to kind of reinvent these wheels in any of these three categories. So they sound so elementary, but you would be shocked of how many people are still trying to figure out how to describe, no, I plug in here, these people buy me, and this is the price, and the pricing schema that they're used to purchasing off of.
Thank you. Well, Colin, we're running out of time. Once again, really an honor to have you join us today. Thank you so much for speaking with me in our community. For any participants who are interested in SHRM credit for participating today, you can head over to our HR Tech discussion space, where we've pinned the SHRM attendance form to the top of the channel. A reminder that code Colin Day will get you 35% off of 1 year of a premium or iCIMS community membership. A lot of members have their employer pay for the membership, so we do have a letter to justify the expense down in the FAQ section on our website. Colin, thanks again. I look forward to speaking to you soon, and take care. Bye, everybody.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. And thanks, everyone.